Hi, in this node.js video training, we will be learning about RESTful APIs and how you can implement RESTful APIs in node.js. What is REST architecture? REST stands for Representational State Transfer. REST is web standards based architecture and uses HTTP protocol. It revolves around resource where every component is a resource and a resource is accessed by a common interface using HTTP standard methods. REST was first introduced by Roy Fielding in 2000. A REST server simply provides access to resources, and REST client accesses and modifies the resources using HTTP protocol. Here each resource is identified by URIs or global IDs. REST uses various representation to represent a resource like text, Json, XML, but Json is the most popular one. Let's look at the HTTP methods. Following four HTTP methods are commonly used in REST-based architecture. The first one is GET. This is used to provide a read-only access to a resource. The second is PUT. This is used to create a new resource. Then we have delete. This is used to remove a resource. And the last one is POST. This is used to update an existing resource or create a new resource. Let's look at an example of our JSON users data. So we need to create a users.json file which we will be using in this video training. First of all, let's create a project directory for this training, and I'm going to name it node REST APIs. Node REST APIs. Okay, let's create the users.json file. Okay, sorry, here. Okay, user1 colon, then we have this name, can say John, then we have password I can say password1, profession teacher, and at the end we have ID. This is a unique identifier for this user. We can copy this data of user1 and create user2. You can call this user do and password2, call this student, and the ID we can say 2. Let's save this file. Okay, I don't have permissions for this folder, so let's set some permissions. Node REST APIs. Okay, I have got the permissions now, so I'll be able to save users.json file. Okay, it's saved here. Okay, let's move to next step. Based on the information we are going to provide following REST APIs, the number one API we will be creating is list users. It will show list of all the users. Then we have add user API. It uses the post HTTP method and it contains post body in JSON string and add details of new users. Then we have delete user. It uses delete HTTP method and it is used to delete an existing user. At the end we have simple ID. It is a GET request and it shows details of a user, and the ID is basically the unique identifier in the user data. Let's write the list users API, and I'm going to create a file called server.js. Okay, let's create a new file, server.js. Okay, and let's create express object and require the express web server. Create the app object by using the express server object. Let's create the file system object by requiring the file system module. Then I'm going to write app.get. This is the root of the REST API list users, and we will be having request and response objects, and I'm going to use file system object read file, and we are going to read the file called users.json, and it's UTF-8 encoded. Okay, and this function further have error and data objects. We can console.log data to the user and response dot end data. Okay, let's save this file on the next screen. Then we need to create the web server object. Server equals app.listen 8. Let's use the 8081 port. Function. Let's create the host object. Server.address. This gives us the host string. Then we have the port. Let's get the port of the server, and this is the port. Okay, now console.log example app listening at http colon // and we have %s colon %s and host and port. Basically, the first parameter will be replaced by host, and the second %s will be replaced by the port variable. So that's how it works. Let's save this file and let's run it. We won't be able to run it because we haven't installed the express module in our application, but let's try. You see it says cannot find module express, so I'm going to install the express module. npm install express. Okay, express is being installed. It will take a while. Okay, let's install. Okay, we have a permission issue, I think. Okay, let's start the server. Okay, we have example app listing at port 8081, and I'm going to hit it in the browser, and I'm going to say list users. As you can see, the server have sent an output to the client, and it contains the users data, user1 and user2, which we added in our users.json file. Okay, so I can comment it here, list users API. Okay, let's move next. Okay, the next is how to add a new user in the list. Following is the detail of the new user. Okay, let's create the user object. Let's do it here. User equals user4 or user3, we can say, as we have two users in our current scenario. Name, I can say Rob, and password I can say password 3, have profession, and I can say librarian, and then we have the unique identifier, which I can give it 3. Okay, let's save it and move to the next step. Now I'm going to create another endpoint to add a new user, so and it will be a post HTTP method. So it will be post add user, and then we have the function request and response objects. First read existing users, read file. This is the same thing which we did in the list users API. Read file. Okay, directory name returns us the current directory, and we need to fetch users.json. The encoding is UTF-8. Okay, then we have the function error and data, and here we are going to do our processing. First fetch the data from the users.json file, then add the new user, call it user3, and pass on the user3 element from the user JSON. Console.log data. This is the updated data after the user3 has been added to the current user, and then we close the connection and pass the list to as a response. Okay, I think we are done here with the add user API. Okay, let's shut down the server and run it again. Okay, and I'm going to hit the add user API now. Add user. Okay, it says cannot get add user. Okay, the reason being here is we need to use a post request. I tried to use a get request, that's why it didn't work out. To solve this problem, let's create a simple HTML file with form method equals post and action equals, you can say http localhost colon 8081 and add user. Okay, let's close the form, and I'm just going to include an input type submit button and name it submit. Can add user. Let's save this file. You can save it here right now, and I'm going to call it add user.html, or I'm going to actually, yeah, we can save it here, no issues. Add user.html. Okay, let's save it here. Let's go to the folder where we have this project and have it node REST APIs, and here is our HTML file add user.html, and I'm going to click the add user button. Okay, it says expected unexpected token U in JSON at position 0. There is some issue with our user JSON that we have created, so let's review that. Okay, we are facing this issue, and let's debug this. Okay, the issue is right here. We have a typo here. The file is users.json, not user.json. That was an issue, and hopefully it will be resolved now. Let's save this file and run it again. Okay, go to the browser, add user again. You see we have added a new user successfully, which is user 3, Rob, password 3, librarian, and ID is 3. And this is the endpoint that we have used for creating the add user API. Let's move to the next step, and that's we have already done. Okay, now let's move on to the next step, and this step is basically showing the data of any user by providing his ID, and it will be called by using the user ID and will display the detail of the corresponding user. So let's first of all, let me add the endpoint REST API for adding a new user. Okay, and now we are going to the API for fetching specific user data by user ID, and it's a GET request. Okay, and :ID. :ID will be the ID provided by the user in the REST API, and we will figure out what ID they have provided, and we will return the data of that particular user. Okay, users.json, we have UTF-8 function error data, and var users equal json.parse data. This will give us the list of users that are in the users.json file. Now we are going to fetch the data of a particular user from the users data in users.file. User plus acquire request.params.id, and we will be outputting the data of the user and also send it as a response json.stringify and user, and we are done with this API as well. Now let's shut down the server, start the server again, and now we are going to fetch data of a particular user. Let's say fetch the data of user 2, which is Do and is a student. So let's go to the browser and mention the ID, which is 2 in this case. You see we have the data of user Do. Now if you want to fetch the data of user 1, just simply enter 1 and press enter, and you have the data of user 1. So this endpoint gives us the data of the user for which we provide the user ID. Okay, the last one here is the delete user. This API is very similar to add user API, where we receive input data through request.body, and then based on user ID we delete that user from the database. To keep our program simple, we assume we are going to delete user with ID 2. So let's create an endpoint for deleting the REST API for deleting a user. Okay, and this will be a delete request. So I'm going to use app.delete, and the endpoint will be delete user, and followed by the user ID, the function, and the function receive request and response objects. Okay, first read existing users. This is the same code that we have in all of our APIs. Users.json encoding UTF-8 function error data. Okay, data equals JSON dot parse data. This is the list of existing users. Then we are going to delete a particular user from the data array. That user plus request dot params dot id soul.log data and response and json dot stringify and send the data back to the user. That's it for this endpoint. Let's save this file, shut down the server, let's run the server again, and let's hit the delete user API, and I'm going to delete the user 2 by passing its ID. It says cannot get delete user 2. Okay, user delete. Let's try this. Okay, basically we cannot hit this API with the delete request. You need a REST API client or a browser extension which can hit an API on your local machine, and you can mention it here like this: 7.0.0.1/delete user /ID of the user. Okay, this is the Postman application that I'm going to use to check our delete API, and I can copy it here and copy paste here. Okay, now let's run this example. Okay, the node server is stopped. Okay, let's hit it again. You see we have deleted user 2 and we are returned with user 1. Stop the server, run it again, and now I am going to delete user number 1, and we are done with user 1 and we only have been left with user 2. That's how the delete REST API works. You cannot test this in the browser. you need a REST client to test this API. So you can simply download Postman. It's a free tool which you can use for testing REST APIs. Okay, that's it for this video training. You can download all the source code that we have created during this video training from my GitHub repository. I'm including that link in this video training description of YouTube. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you next time with a new topic in Node.js.